first heard about the lab back at my previous job when I was doing some background work to learn what is happening across the globe, across the country, to help me understand how we can build valuable networks, how we can build accountability in the system, and how we can build support responsible leaders in our society. So that process for me was also trying to look what the internet has about information, which can help me understand largely to solve some of these challenges in my head. That's how I found out about Accountability Lab in the process.
We run several programs. We have a lot. We do the Accountability Lab Incubator program, and that's empowering young change makers with skills to implement ideas and impacts or sustainable, impactful projects in their communities. And we've done that for the past 5 years. And then we do Integrity Icon campaign, and in the Integrity Icon campaign, I think we've celebrated about 28 icons over the years. We also do the CivActs. The CivActs is trying to close back the feedback loop of the communities just to ensure that there's a strengthened relationship between the governed and the governed. And one thing that is unique about the CivActs, especially for us in Nigeria, is we've been able to adapt it to different contexts. Case in point, in Jos, we use the CivActs to ensure inclusivity or gender inclusivity for women and persons with disability in political parties, and just equipping them with skills to also request for gender inclusive policies. And one of the progress we saw from that project was that 5 women got interested, and they are now part of political parties. We also adapted the CivActs model for our extractives work in the Niger Delta, where we were able to aggregate citizens' challenges from the community, and then we were able to send them to elected representatives just to close back the feedback loop and ensure that the challenges that they have identified from their communities, especially oil-producing communities, were being addressed by the government officials and stakeholders that were in charge. Yeah, so CivActs has been one of our strongest community grassroots connection, and is one of the projects that is dear to my heart for Accountability Lab. We have other projects that we run at the lab, and then we do Voice to Rep, and then Voice to Rep is supporting undiscovered artists to produce socially conscious music. And we have just transitioned from just not only supporting these artists, but we now have a full-fledged studio that continue to support artists every day, year in, year out, with equipment and just like a conducive environment so that they can push out their content and thrive. So we also do that. The new strategy is focused on inclusion, which has always been a cross-cutting theme around all the programs that we run. And we have also been at the forefront of supporting women, youth, and persons with disability. Our work with the National Commission of Persons with Disability in trying to push for the accessibility minimum standard, and then also seeing that buildings are remodified to be accessible to persons with disability before the deadline in 2023. And we're also trying to push for the 5% employment that was stated in the Disability Act of 2018. So inclusion is one of the key things that Accountability Lab Nigeria works in. So for us at Accountability Lab Nigeria, we are trying to find very unique ways to see how we can continue to push that women, youths, and persons with disability continue to demand accountability from the leaders who just emerged as winners. I know because the elections were really mad with some irregularities, a lot of young people don't feel like the system really works, or the checks and balances from the levels of government are really effective, and they feel like there's no point. But at Accountability Lab, we are trying to see that we continue to put the conversation that citizens need to hold leaders accountable out in different spaces, on social media, on traditional media, so we can continue to build and push that momentum going forward. Recently, we got funded by the National Endowment for Democracy to also work on digital rights and privacy in Nigeria. So we are thinking of setting up a coalition of civil society organizations that can effectively push, because digital rights and privacy are very key issues that we face in Nigeria.
The globalization of global phenomenon and global ideas is one of the most pertinent parts of the development work that we do. One of the things I enjoy about the lab the most is that every lab has its own independence to function based on its own nuances wherever it is that it finds itself. Local contexts are the small pieces of what contributes to global ideas, and for the singular reason that we do this as translocal networks have been very, very helpful. And one of the things I like about it is that transfer of knowledge is very important, because sometimes, in as much as we are divided by this idea of borders, certain issues that we have in one part of the world actually affects each and every one of us in other parts of the world. So whatever solutions that a particular lab have actually created on its own, in its own small space, is something that can be adopted across different country labs. Like a typical example would be with the CivActs and how that have actually transformed the functionality of the lab in general. So yeah, for us in the Nigerian lab, one of the things I think we really prioritize, and one of the things that we bring to the fore of the lab, is the strength of our communications department and the way we implement our projects. Nigeria is a very big community, one of the biggest in the world, and probably arguably one of the biggest as well in the different labs we have across different countries. And because of that, we are exposed to so many other different cultures that are predominant here, different ideologies that come into the way we do our work, the way we interface with the general population, and that I think has really helped in the growth of the lab across different countries.
Last year, interestingly, the value of the Translocal Network has strengthened and impacted the Accountability Lab Nigerian team through engagements which we build at the lab with the Translocal Network, looking at shared values, shared identities, and shared understanding. This, in terms of practical engagement, means the engagement with the communications team, with the work we do in how we share our identity across board and learn from what we are doing across board. This also looks at the finance team in their monthly meetings, where they have these discussions and learnings across board to build that shared identity on what we stand for and what we want to see happen in our communities.
It's quite difficult to actually pick one that is actually top priority. Honestly, it's a conversation we are still having here at the Nigerian lab. But one of the things I know we have put at the fore is digital governance. Our democracy is actually evolving, and at a very rapid rate as it is right now in this country, with the introduction of new technologies into the electioneering process and how digital governance is becoming in the country. Digital governance is one of the most key priority for us here. We want to ensure that digital rights and data protection of Nigerian citizens are at the vanguard of government conversations, just to ensure that when the world or the country fully transits into that process, people can actually still exercise their rights and maintain their legitimacy in whatever it is that they're doing, and also to ensure that laws that are applicable here are also applicable there, and that people can actually caution themselves in how they interact with other people, and how government use citizens' data, and how citizens themselves are allowed to give out their information, and the way they actually use that digital governance space. So yes, digital governance is at the fore of our conversation right now. Climate justice is also a very pertinent conversation to have, because with the floods that are always predominant in Nigeria almost every year, and the change in the weather conditions, climate change cannot actually be denied. One of our work that we're doing this year with Ford Foundation is to address this in rural communities, oil producing communities in rural places, just to also help the government to see how we can help them implement the Petroleum Industry Act, and how they can set up the host community trust fund to ensure that communities that have grievances as a ripple effect of both the mismanagement from oil companies and also the climate change can also get their own compensation on how they can actually lead productive lives. So, but since the question actually asks which of them is actually our priority right now, I would say it's actually digital governance.
Interestingly for me, I stand to be one of those big beneficiaries for the great work being done at Accountability Lab, and for those interested in changing the world, the Accountability Lab, one key thing we do is putting the people before policies. Yes, we have policies, but we are very, very flexible to ensuring that creativity comes before any other thing. So people's voices are being heard, and your contributions are taken highly to the impacts which we want to put forward out to the world. But yes, I encourage you to find time to join the Accountability Lab and join the exciting work we're doing and the creative work we're doing. Thank you very much.